Hi, I'm Leigh Anne from your Homebased Learning how to cook the perfect steak is an art, but it's an art that is easily learned. And today, I'm sharing with you all my tips and tricks to how to make the perfect steak. Join me in the kitchen. The process we're going to use today for our perfect steak is called a reverse sear. And you're not going to need a grill, you're not going to need a smoker, but you will need an oven and a stovetop. Before we get started though, I want to go over all the tools and ingredients you're going to need because you want to make sure you have all those on hand and ready. First, one of the most important things is a cast iron pan. You want some kind of heavy pan. I always use cast iron because cast iron gets really hot, and that's really important, something that's going to get really hot. Of course, you're going to need a steak. Today we are using ribeye because that's our favorite cut of steak, but I just buy whatever your budget can afford. You can use this method on pretty much any cut of meat, but I love the ribeye. And this ribeye is the perfect amount the way I'm going to cook it and slice it for the two of us. You don't need a whole steak per person. We're going to need some coarse salt, either some coarse kosher salt. I'm using a coarse gray French salt, some freshly ground pepper. We're going to need a couple tablespoons of butter and a couple tablespoons of canola oil. We're going to use the canola oil in the pan to sear our meat because it can get really hot and not burn. We're going to use some whole cloves of garlic and some sprigs. I prefer rosemary. You could use thyme or whatever herb maybe you have growing in your garden. Another really important tool is a meat thermometer. This is really important because you don't want to be cutting into your steak to see if it's done. Because when you do that, you release a bunch of juices and you dry your meat out. This is my favorite one. I use it all the time. It's by ThermoWorks. I'll link to it down below. Then the last thing you're going to need is you're going to need some type of a roasting pan because we're going to put our meat into the oven. I've just taken a cookie sheet, I wrapped it in some foil and put a cooling rack inside of it. We're going to put our meat on this into the oven. You just need something that's going to keep the meat up off the bottom of the pan. I recommend purchasing your meat at least 24 hours ahead of time because there is a little prep work that you're going to do that is easy, but it's going to make a big difference in the taste of your meat. And that is 24 hours at a time or at least 4 hours ahead of time. Take your steak, sprinkle it with some of that coarse salt, and then wrap it up just in some plastic saran wrap and stick it in the refrigerator for those 4 to 24 hours. What's going to happen is that salt is just going to melt into your meat and it's going to create amazing flavor. So I've already done that part, and so we're ready to actually do the reverse sear and cook it and enjoy it for dinner. So I'm going to take my steak and I'm going to place it onto this rack that I've prepared. Then I'm going to sprinkle it with a little bit more salt and some of that ground pepper. And I have to say, my son is the one that taught me how to cook steak like this. One of the best parts of having adult children is when you go and visit them, they cook for you. And he's like a grill master, meat master. And so I had him teach me how to do steak. And he said, when I asked him, so how much salt do I know how to put on? And he says, probably more than you're comfortable with. So maybe just a little bit more than you're comfortable with, but you don't want to cover it and coat it in there or it's gonna, taste. You can see I've just kind of put a nice sprinkling of salt on there. All right, then we're gonna do some fresh ground pepper. And then this is gonna go into our oven. We have preheated our oven to 250 degrees. And we're gonna put this in and we're gonna let it bake for about, the time's gonna vary depending on how thick your steak is, and it could be anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes. Mine is not really thick. Mine's only maybe just under an inch thick, so mine's probably gonna take 20 minutes or so. And that is where this meat thermometer comes in really handy so that I can check the temperature, and you always wanna insert it into the thickest part of your meat. Now, because I like my meat medium rare, I am gonna cook my meat until it hits about 125 degrees. If you want your meat more well done, go ahead and cook it until the temperature reaches about 10, maybe 15 degrees below your desired end temperature, okay? So for me, my desired end temperature is 135, so I'm gonna cook mine to 125. Then we're gonna finish cooking it off and doing that sear in our cast iron pan. Now this is where it gets exciting. I have pulled our steak out of the oven. It reached that 125 degrees. I have my cast iron pan with my 2 tablespoons of canola oil heating up, and we want it's gonna get hot. I've got it set at about 400, 425, and we want our cast iron to start to smoke a little bit. That way we know it's really hot. So word of caution, it may get really exciting around here when my smoke detector goes off, which it does very easily. So I've opened my doors and my windows because it's going to get a little smoky. So get some ventilation going, turn on your fan, open a window. So we're going to take our steak, and generally you sear a piece of meat before you bake it or cook it, and that's why this is called a reverse sear. So we actually sear it at the very end. So I've got my hot oil. You're going to hear it sizzle. That's what you want. And we're going to sear it on each side for about 30 to 60 seconds until you get a nice little brown crust on the bottom of your steak. And you'll know it's seared or done enough when it releases from the pan, and it won't be stuck to the pan any longer. All right, you missed it, but my smoke alarm went off. All right, so we've got this nice brown crust on both sides. I'm going to turn my heat down a little bit because I'm afraid I'm going to set the smoke detector off again. Then we're going to add in our butter. Let it melt. We're going to add our herbs. It's kind of loud, I know. And our butter, or our garlic on top of our steak. And then as the butter starts to melt, we're going to spoon it over the top of our steak. And it is going to taste amazing. All right. So just let that butter brown a little bit. Scoop it over the top. Let that garlic kind of infuse in there. And then all you have to do is check the temperature of your meat again, and you want it to be what your final desired temperature is, which we're going for 135. And then we're going to pull it out and slice it up. Now, a lot of people think you should let your meat rest for a while. We don't ever wait that long. We just go ahead and slice right into it. The only thing you have left to do is slice it up. My favorite way is just to thinly slice it. You'll find your steak, your ribeye goes a lot farther, and it is delicious. It's perfect. It's easy. You're going to love it. Thanks for joining me in the kitchen today, and make sure you check down below for some of my other favorite dishes and recipes and videos that you can find here on YouTube.